The last candle in the Duchess's chamber had burned down to a pool of wax. By the time Elena heard the footsteps in the corridor, she had waited 5 hours. 5 hours in her wedding gown, the ivory silk grown heavy and cold against her skin, the pearls her mother had sewn into the bodice, with her own hands pressing into her ribs like small stones. The maid had come 3 times to offer to help her undress. 3 times Elena had sent her away. He will come, she had told herself. It is our wedding night. He must come. But the footsteps passed her door without stopping. Elena sat perfectly still on the edge of the great canopied bed, her hands folded in her lap, her veil still pinned to her dark hair, and listened to her husband's boots carry him down the hallway to the west wing, to his own chambers. Away from her, she did not cry. She had been raised better than that. The daughter of an earl did not weep over a man who did not want her, even if that man was now her husband. Even if she had loved him silently for 3 years before their families had arranged the match instead, she stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the moonlit grounds of Ashworth Hall. The estate was beautiful, vast, ancient, and cold. Much like its master, Elena pressed her palm against the glass and let the chills seep into her skin. She had known Alexander Ashworth, the Duke of Marwick, did not love her. She had known this marriage was one of convenience, of alliance, of duty. But she had hoped, in the foolish way young women sometimes hope, that proximity might breed affection, that he might look at her once, truly look at her, and see someone worth knowing. Instead, he had not even glanced at her during the wedding breakfast. He had spoken 5 words to her during the ceremony. And now, on their wedding night, he had walked past her door as though she did not exist. Elena closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would be the perfect duchess. Tomorrow she would smile at breakfast, ask about the estate, pretend her heart was not a bruised and aching thing inside her chest. But tonight, she let the silence hold her. The first month at Ashworth Hall passed with the cold regularity of a clock. Elena learned quickly that the Duke of Marwick was a man of unyielding routine. Rose at dawn, rode the estate boundaries until breakfast, spent the afternoon in his study managing the vast holdings of the dukedom, and dined alone unless custom demanded otherwise. He spoke little. He smiled less. His face, for all its striking handsomeness, was a mask of stone. To Elena he was perfectly, meticulously polite. "Good morning, Your Grace. Good morning. I trust you slept well. Enough. If there is anything you require for the household, please inform the steward." "I shall." Then he would leave, and the room would feel emptier for his absence. The servants were kind. The housekeeper, Mrs. Bell, was a warm woman who showed Elena the gardens and the stillroom with genuine enthusiasm. The cook consulted her on menus. The groundskeeper brought her fresh flowers for her sitting room. In a strange way, Elena felt more welcome among the staff than she did in the presence of her husband. It was on a Tuesday, 4 weeks after the wedding, that Elena first heard the name. She was arranging roses in the morning room when 2 maids passed by the open door, their voices carrying before they realized the Duchess was within earshot. "It's a shame, truly. The old Duke was the same, you know, never got over his first love." "Who was she?" "Lady Marguerite Ashby. Beautiful, they say, golden hair, voice like a songbird. She was promised to the young Duke before she died. Consumption, I think. Terrible thing, he was only 22. He never loved again. They say he can't. They say his heart is buried in the churchyard with her." The voices faded down the corridor. Elena's hand had stilled on the stem of a rose. A thorn pressed into her thumb, but she did not feel it, so that was it. That was the ghost she was living with, Marguerite. She said the name silently, testing its weight. It was a beautiful name. It suited a woman with golden hair and a songbird's voice. It suited the kind of woman a man mourned for 12 years, the kind of woman whose memory was so bright it made the living invisible by comparison. Elena withdrew her hand from the rose. A small bead of blood welled on her thumb. She watched it for a moment, then wiped it away with a handkerchief. She was not angry. Anger would have been easier, she thought. Anger would have been something warm, something alive. Instead, she felt only a dull, spreading ache, as though someone had pressed a bruise into a place too deep to reach. She had been competing with a dead woman for her husband's heart. And she had not even known it. The first public humiliation came at Lady Harrington's autumn ball. It was Elena's first formal appearance as the Duchess of Marwick since the wedding, and she had taken extraordinary care with her appearance. Her gown was deep emerald silk, cut in the latest fashion, with delicate gold embroidery along the sleeves. Her dark hair was dressed with pearls. When she looked in the mirror before descending the staircase, she had thought she looked every inch a duchess. The ballroom was crowded and glittering when they arrived. Alexander walked beside her, his arm offered with stiff formality, his face already arranged into the remote expression she had come to know so well. For the first hour, Elena tried. She smiled at the women who approached her. She accepted compliments on her gown with gracious warmth. She spoke of the estate and the autumn hunting season with every appearance of ease. But she could feel the whispers moving through the room like a current beneath still water, and she knew, with the instinct of a woman long accustomed to social scrutiny, that something was wrong. It was Lady Catherine Darrow who delivered the blow. Lady Catherine was the sort of woman who delivered blows with a smile, and she approached Alina with two other young ladies in tow, her fan fluttering delicately before her face. "Your Grace," she said, dipping into a curtsy that was just a shade too shallow to be properly respectful. "How wonderful to see you. We were all so eager to meet the new Duchess of Marwick." "You are very kind," Alina said. "At all." Lady Catherine's eyes sparkled with something that was not kindness. "You were simply saying, were we not, how brave you must be?" Alina's smile did not waver, but something inside her went very still. "Brave? To marry the Duke, of course, knowing what everyone knows." Lady Catherine leaned in, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that carried perfectly to the surrounding guests. "It cannot be easy being second choice, especially when the first was so very beloved." The words landed like a slap. For a moment, Alina could not breathe. The noise of the ballroom receded to a distant roar. She was aware of eyes upon her, of fans hiding smirking mouths, of the terrible, polite curiosity of the ton, but Alina was the daughter of an earl. She had been trained for this since childhood. "I assure you, Lady Catherine," she said, her voice steady and cool as winter water, "I do not consider myself second to anyone. The Duke chose to marry me. That is all that matters." Lady Catherine's smile flickered just slightly. "Of course, how sensible you are." She drifted away with her companions, and Alina was left standing alone in the center of the ballroom, the pearls in her hair suddenly feeling as heavy as chains. She looked across the room and found Alexander. He was standing by the windows, speaking with Lord Harrington. He had not noticed the exchange. He had not noticed his wife being publicly cut down by a woman who had clearly been in love with him herself. He had not noticed any of it. But as Alina watched, she saw his gaze drift toward the far corner of the ballroom, where a portrait hung above the mantelpiece. It was a portrait of a young woman with golden hair. Alina turned and walked out onto the terrace alone. The cold air struck her face like a necessary slap. She gripped the stone balustrade and breathed great shuddering breaths that she had not allowed herself in the ballroom. She did not cry. She would not cry. Behind her, the terrace door opened. She stiffened, expecting a curious guest or worse, her husband's belated concern. Instead, a man's voice said, "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace. I saw you leave. You looked as though you might need a moment, but I wanted to be certain you were well." Alina turned. The man standing in the terrace doorway was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark auburn hair and a face that was pleasant rather than handsome. He had kind eyes. That was the first thing Alina noticed. Kind eyes and a gentle mouth. "I am quite well," she said. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Whitmore," he said, stepping forward to bow. "Thomas Whitmore, I am a guest of Lord Harrington, a distant cousin, I'm afraid, the least interesting branch of the family tree." Herself, Alina felt her mouth twitch. "I doubt that is true, Mr. Whitmore. You are gracious to say so." He studied her face with an openness that was not quite proper, but was not offensive either. "I saw what happened in there." Lady Catherine has always had a talent for cruelty. It is her only accomplishment. Alina looked away. "It does not matter." "It matters," he said quietly. "It matters because it hurt you and you did not deserve it." There was something in his voice, a simple sincerity that made Alina's throat tighten. She had not realized how starved she had been for kindness until that moment. "You do not know what I deserve, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "You do not know me." "No," he agreed. "But I know what it is to be lonely in a crowded room, and you, Your Grace, looked very lonely." Alina met his eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the terrace door opened again, and Alexander stepped out. The Duke's gaze went first to Alina, then to Thomas Whitmore, and something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been displeasure, or might have been something else entirely. "Alina," he said, "it is cold. You should come inside." It was the first time he had spoken her name without the title attached. The sound of it startled her more than she wanted to admit. "I was just returning," she said. Alexander's eyes remained fixed on Thomas. "Whitmore, Grace," Thomas bowed, his expression carefully neutral. "I was merely ensuring the Duchess was well. She seemed distressed." "My wife does not require your concern," Alexander said. The words were cold, territorial. The words of a man who was staking a claim on something he had never bothered to possess. Alina felt a sudden, sharp flare of anger. "Mr. Whitmore was being kind," she said, "which is more than can be said for most of the people in that ballroom." Alexander's gaze snapped to her. There was surprise there and something else, something she could not read. "I see," he said. "Do you?" Alina lifted her chin. Did you see Lady Catherine Darrow humiliate me in front of half the ton? Did you see your guests whisper about your first love while your wife stood 3 feet away? Did you see any of it? The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas Whitmore took a careful step backward. I should return inside, Your Grace. He bowed to Elena, nodded to the Duke, and disappeared through the terrace door. Elena and Alexander were left alone in the cold. I did not see, Alexander said at last. His voice was low. I did not know. No, Elena said. You never do. She walked past him, back into the ballroom, and did not look at him again for the rest of the night. Something shifted after that night. Elena stopped waiting. She stopped waiting for Alexander to come to her door. She stopped waiting for him to look at her across the breakfast table. She stopped waiting for him to see her as a wife rather than a piece of furniture he had acquired for the estate. Instead, she began to build a life of her own. She took over the management of the household with a quiet efficiency that impressed even Mrs. Bell. She redesigned the East Garden, which had been neglected for years, planting roses and lavender and a small herb garden that reminded her of her mother. She began visiting the tenants on the estate, learning their names and their troubles, bringing baskets of food to new mothers, and sitting with the elderly during the long autumn afternoons. The tenants began to speak of her warmly. The servants began to smile when she entered a room, and Thomas Whitmore began to call at Ashworth Hall. His visits were always proper. He came with his sister, or with a mutual acquaintance, or on some pretext of estate business. But he always found a moment to speak with Elena alone, to ask after her well-being, to make her laugh with some wry observation about society or politics or the absurdities of the gentry. He was kind. He was attentive. He looked at her as though she mattered. And Elena, starved for warmth, began to look forward to his visits more than she should. Alexander noticed. She could tell by the way his eyes followed her when she entered a room, by the way his jaw tightened when Whitmore's name was mentioned, by the way he began to appear in parts of the house where she had never seen him before, as though he was checking on her, as though he was watching. One afternoon in late November, she was in the music room, playing the pianoforte. It was an old instrument, slightly out of tune, but she had loved music since childhood and had not been able to resist. She was playing a piece her mother had taught her, a sad, sweet melody that spoke of longing and loss. When she became aware of a presence in the doorway, she stopped playing and looked up. Alexander stood there, his face half in shadow. His expression unreadable. Not stop, he said. I did not know you played. Never asked, Elena said. The words were not cruel. They were simply true. Alexander flinched almost imperceptibly. No, I suppose I did not. Stepped into the room, moving with the quiet, contained energy that always seemed to surround him. He stopped a few feet from the pianoforte, looking down at her. You have been seeing a great deal of Thomas Whitmore, he said. Elena's fingers rested on the keys. He is a friend. Is he? Was not a question. Elena met her husband's gaze steadily. Yes, he is a friend. He speaks to me. He asks about my day. He notices when I am present in a room. She paused. Would you like me to continue the list? Alexander's expression did not change, but something in his eyes darkened. You are my wife, am I? Elena rose from the pianoforte bench, turning to face him fully. Because for 3 months I have felt more like a ghost. You pass through the same rooms I inhabit, but you do not see me. You speak to me as though I am a stranger. You have never once touched my hand or asked about my family or shown the slightest interest in who I am. So tell me, Alexander, in what sense am I your wife? The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. You do not understand, he said at last. Then explain it to me. Elena's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. Explain to me why you married me if you did not want me. Explain to me why you let me sit alone on our wedding night. Explain to me why you look at a portrait but you cannot look at me. Alexander's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might answer. She saw something move behind his eyes, something that might have been pain or guilt or the first stirring of some long-buried emotion. Then his face closed. The mask slipped back into place. You would not understand, he said, and he walked out of the room. Elena stood alone in the music room, the echo of the pianoforte fading around her, and felt something inside her chest begin to crack. The Christmas ball was meant to be the triumph of the season. Ashworth Hall was decorated with holly and ivy and great swags of evergreen. Candlelight glowed in every window. The ballroom, unused for years before Elena's arrival, had been polished and perfumed and filled with flowers. The Duchess had planned every detail herself, and as the first carriages began to arrive through the falling snow, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She wore silver that night, a gown of pale grey silk that caught the light like frost, with a necklace of diamonds that had belonged to Alexander's mother. She had found the diamonds in a dusty chest in the attic and had asked Mrs. Bell about them. The late Duke gave them to the Duchess on their 10th anniversary, Mrs. Bell had said. She wore them to every ball until she died. The Duke never let anyone touch them after that. Alexander, Elena had asked. Does he know they are here? I do not think His Grace has opened that chest since his mother passed. Elena had put the diamonds on anyway. She was the Duchess of Marwick now. If Alexander objected, he could speak to her. He could finally speak to her, the ballroom filled with guests. Music swelled from the corner where the musicians played. Elena moved through the crowd with a smile fixed on her face, greeting earls and viscounts, accepting compliments on the decorations and the refreshments and the winter roses she had arranged with her own hands. Thomas Whitmore was there. He had brought his sister, a shy young woman with a sweet smile, and when he saw Elena, his face lit with the same quiet warmth she had come to depend upon. You look beautiful tonight, Your Grace, he said, bowing over her hand. You are kind, Mr. Whitmore, I am honest. He held her gaze a moment longer than was proper. Ashworth Hall is lucky to have you. I hope its master knows it. Elena's smile flickered. I am not certain its master has noticed. Then its master is a fool, Thomas said quietly. Before Elena could respond, a hand touched her elbow. She turned to find Alexander beside her, his face set in an expression she had never seen before. It was not anger exactly. It was something sharper. Something that looked almost like fear. Elena, he said, may I speak with you privately? She hesitated. She could feel Thomas's eyes on her, could feel the curious attention of the guests around them. I am occupied at present, she said. Perhaps later. Now, Alexander said. His voice was low, but there was something urgent in it, something that made Elena's heart skip despite herself. Very well, she said. Excuse me, Mr. Whitmore. She followed Alexander out of the ballroom and into the library. The room was dark, lit only by the fire, and the noise of the ball faded to a distant murmur as Alexander closed the door behind them. What is it? Elena asked. Have I done something wrong? Alexander stood with his back to her for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he turned, his face was strained. The necklace you are wearing, he said. Elena's hand went instinctively to the diamonds at her throat. Yes. They were your mother's. I found them in the attic. They were my mother. Alexander's voice was rough. She wore them the night my father told her he had never loved her. She wore them the night she realized their entire marriage had been a lie. Elena's hand dropped. I did not know. No, you could not have known. Alexander took a step toward her. But seeing you in them, standing in that ballroom, surrounded by all those people, it made me realize something. What? He stopped a foot away from her. The firelight flickered across his face, illuminating the lines around his mouth, the shadows beneath his eyes. He looked, Elena thought, like a man who had been holding his breath for 12 years and had only just remembered how to exhale. You asked me once why I married you, he said. Why I could not look at you, why I kept you at a distance. Yes, I was afraid. The words seemed to cost him something, because I had loved once and lost her, and the grief nearly destroyed me. I told myself I would never let anyone close again. I told myself it was safer that way, for me, for everyone. Elena's throat was tight. And now I have watched you build a life in my house without me. I have watched you charm my tenants and my servants and my friends. I have watched another man look at you the way I should have been looking at you all along. He drew a shuddering breath, and I am afraid of something else now. What? He reached out, and for the first time since their wedding day, he touched her. His fingers brushed her cheek feather-light, as though she was something precious and fragile. I am afraid of losing you, he said. I am afraid it is already too late. Stood perfectly still, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. You ignored me for 3 months, she said. You let me believe I meant nothing to you. You let me believe I was competing with a ghost. I know. You humiliated me. You left me alone on our wedding night. You did not speak to me unless duty demanded it. I know. His voice cracked. Elena, I know, and I do not deserve your forgiveness. I do not deserve anything from you, but I need you to know the truth. Truth. He cupped her face in both hands, his eyes burning into hers. The truth is that I have been in love with you since the moment I saw you. The truth is that I pushed you away because I was terrified of feeling that again, of losing that again. The truth is that Marguerite was my past, but you are my present, and if you will let me, I want you to be my future. Elena felt tears slip down her cheeks, hot and unexpected. She had not cried in months. She had not allowed herself. I do not know if I can trust you, she whispered. I know. Alexander's thumb brushed away her tears. I know. But I will spend the rest of my life earning that trust, if you will let me. I will spend every day proving to you that you are not second to anyone, that you never were. She looked at him, this man who had been a stranger to her for so long, and saw something she had never seen before, vulnerability, openness, the raw, unguarded heart of a man who had been hiding behind a wall of grief for 12 years. Alexander, she said, yes, If you ever walk past my door again, I will leave. I will go back to my father's house, and I will not return. I will never walk past your door again, he said. I swear it. If you ever make me feel invisible again, I will stop loving you. I will stop trying. I will become exactly the cold, distant Duchess you seem to want. You will never feel invisible again. His voice was fierce. I see you, Alina. I have always seen you. I was just too much of a coward to let you see me. She closed her eyes. The tears were still falling, but they did not feel like grief anymore. They felt like release. Then show me, she said. Show me who you really are. Pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since she had become the Duchess of Marwick, Alina felt like she was home. They returned to the ballroom together, her hand resting on his arm. The guests noticed. Of course they noticed. The Duke and Duchess of Marwick, who had spent the entire season in a state of visible estrangement, suddenly appearing in public with their hands intertwined, and a new quiet intimacy in the way they looked at each other. Lady Catherine Darrow's face, Alina noted with quiet satisfaction, was a study in disbelief. Thomas Whitmore caught Alina's eye from across the room. She braced herself for disappointment in his expression, for hurt or anger or betrayal. Instead, he smiled. A small, sad, genuine smile, and he raised his glass to her in a silent toast. She inclined her head in acknowledgement, and he turned away, melting back into the crowd. Who was that? Alexander asked, his voice carefully neutral. A friend, Alina said. Only a friend. Looked at her, and something in his expression softened. I am glad you had a friend when you needed one, even if I wished it could have been me. It can be you now, she said. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, there in front of the entire ballroom, in front of the gossips and the rivals and the ghosts of the past. Then let it be me, he said. From this night forward, let it be me. Spring came to Ashworth Hall like a benediction. The gardens Alina had planted burst into bloom, filling the air with the scent of roses and lavender. The tenant cottages, repaired and whitewashed under her direction, gleamed in the gentle sunlight. The estate, which had seemed so cold and forbidding when she first arrived, had become something else entirely. It had become home. Alexander kept his promises. He did not walk past her door. He did not retreat behind his mask of stone. He spoke to her, truly spoke to her, about his fears and his memories and the guilt he had carried for so long. He told her about Marguerite, about the way she had laughed and the way she had died, about the long years of grief that had hollowed him out and left nothing but duty behind. And Alina listened. She held his hand. She did not try to compete with a ghost, because she understood now that there had never been a competition. There had only been a wounded man who had forgotten how to let himself heal. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Alexander took her to the churchyard. It was a small, ancient church at the edge of the estate, shaded by yew trees and carpeted with wildflowers. He led her to a grave near the eastern wall, a simple headstone carved with a name and a date, Marguerite Ashby, beloved. Alina stood beside her husband and looked down at the grave of the woman he had once loved, and felt no jealousy, only a quiet, unexpected gratitude. I used to come here every week, Alexander said. I would sit and talk to her, tell her about the estate, about the weather, about all the things I wished I had said when she was alive. Now, Alina asked, now I come to say goodbye. He knelt and placed a small bunch of wildflowers at the base of the headstone. I told her about you. I told her I was ready to live again. Alina felt tears prick her eyes. She knelt beside him, her skirts pooling on the grass, and took his hand. Thank you, she said to the headstone, for loving him first, for making him the man he is. I will take care of him now, I promise. Made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and pulled her into his arms. They stayed there for a long time, holding each other in the quiet of the churchyard. As the sun sank low and the shadows lengthened and the birds sang their evening songs, they had a daughter 2 years later. She was born in the middle of a summer storm, with thunder rolling across the hills and rain lashing the windows of Ashworth Hall. Alexander paced the corridor outside Alina's room for 6 hours, ignoring the servants who tried to coax him into the library, ignoring the doctor who assured him everything was progressing normally. When the midwife finally opened the door and told him he had a healthy daughter, he burst into tears. Alina, exhausted and radiant, and holding a tiny, red-faced infant in her arms, looked up at her husband as he entered the room. She has your eyes, she said. Alexander knelt beside the bed, gazing at his daughter with an expression of wonder so pure it made Alina's heart ache. She has your strength, he said. I can see it already. What shall we name her? Alexander looked at Alina, and in his eyes was all the love he had been too afraid to show for so long, all the devotion, all the gratitude. Hope, he said. Let us name her Hope. Alina smiled, and the rain fell, and the thunder rolled. And in the great, ancient house that had once been so cold, a family was born the years past. Hope grew into a bright, laughing child who raced through the halls of Ashworth Hall with muddy shoes and tangled hair. The tenants adored her. The servants spoiled her. And Alexander, who had once been a man of stone, became a father who carried his daughter on his shoulders and taught her to ride and told her stories every night before she slept. Elena watched them together and felt a happiness so deep it sometimes stole her breath. She had come to Ashworth Hall as a bride unwanted, a wife unseen. She had built a life from the ashes of neglect, had found strength in the depths of loneliness, and she had been rewarded with a love that was richer and more enduring than the fairy tale romance she had once dreamed of as a girl. One evening, when Hope was 5 years old, Elena stood at the window of her sitting room and looked out at the gardens. The roses were in full bloom, crimson and gold and white, and the air was thick with the scent of lavender. Alexander came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I am thinking about the night of our wedding," she said. "The night you walked past my door." Alexander winced. "Must you remind me of my greatest failure?" "It is not a failure," Elena said, turning in his arms to face him. "It is a beginning. If you had come to me that night, if you had been a different man, I would never have learned to stand on my own. I would never have learned who I was without you." "Who are you without me?" he asked softly. "Someone strong," she said. "Someone who knows her own worth. Someone who chose to love you not because she needed to, but because she wanted to." Alexander kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the corner of her mouth. "And do you still want to?" "More than ever," she said. He smiled, and the years fell away from his face, and Elena saw the man he had been before grief had claimed him, the man he had become again because of her. "I love you, Elena Ashworth," he said. "My wife, my duchess, my heart." "I love you," she said. "My husband, my duke, my home." Outside, the sun sank below the hills, and the roses nodded in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the garden, a little girl with her father's eyes and her mother's strength laughed at the first appearance of the evening star. The house that had once been so cold was warm now, and it would stay warm forever.